action star of today. Scott Adkins' martial arts background has led to leading roles in films such as The Expendables 2, Doctor Strange, and American Assassin.
He can do a backflip from a standing position. He's mastered 10 different martial arts. He's been called the closest thing to a real-life superhero by people who actually know how to fight. And yet, while actors who can barely throw a punch headline $100 million franchises, Scott Adkins has spent 20 years making movies most people have never heard of. This is the story of the most skilled action star Hollywood refuses to make famous. And when you find out why, you'll never look at your favorite action movies the same way again. The British Underdog, June 17, 1976. A boy named Scott Edward Adkins was born in Sutton Coldfield, a working-class town outside Birmingham, England. His father was a butcher. His mother worked in a shop. Nobody in that family had Hollywood dreams because Hollywood wasn't dreaming about people like them. At 10 years old, Adkins walked into his first martial arts class. Judo first, then Taekwondo, then kickboxing. Something clicked immediately. The discipline, the precision, the way a perfectly executed technique could stop a bigger opponent. He wasn't just training, he was transforming. By his teenage years, Adkins was obsessed. He studied Bruce Lee films frame by frame, trying to understand the mechanics of every move. He trained in ninjutsu, learning how to move like smoke. He added tricking, the acrobatic martial art that combines gymnastics with combat techniques. Then came XMA, extreme martial arts, where fighters throw moves that look physically impossible. Most people dabble in one martial art and call themselves practitioners. Adkins mastered 10. Judo, kickboxing, taekwondo, jujutsu, wushu, karate, ninjutsu, tricking, acrobatics, and gymnastics. Not weekend warrior levels, black belts and competitive achievements. He could have been an Olympic-level gymnast. He could have been a professional fighter. Instead, he looked at Jackie Chan and Jet Li and thought he could do that. So he moved to London, enrolled in the Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art, one of Britain's most prestigious acting schools. His classmates were learning Shakespeare. Adkins was learning Shakespeare while secretly perfecting spinning hook kicks in empty studios. He graduated in 1997 with legitimate acting training and a body that could do things most stunt coordinators had never seen in person. Then came the grind. Small roles in British television, bit parts in films nobody watched. He appeared in a Hong Kong action film called Dai Seung Chue Kung in 2001, playing a nameless villain who gets destroyed in seconds. He did stunt work. He took whatever kept him in the game. For years, this was his life, waiting for someone to notice what he could actually do. The breakthrough that wasn't 2006 changed everything, or it should have. Director Isaac Florentine, a filmmaker who understood martial arts the way Scorsese understands crime, was making Undisputed 2, Last Man Standing. He needed someone who could fight like a demon and act well enough to carry a film. His casting director showed him footage of Scott Adkins. Florentine watched Adkins move and saw something nobody else in Hollywood was seeing. This wasn't a bodybuilder who learned stage combat. This wasn't a wrestler pretending to know martial arts. This was a legitimate martial artist who could also act. Florentine cast him as Yuri Boyka, a Russian prison fighter with skills that bordered on superhuman. When Undisputed 2 dropped, action fans lost their minds. The fight choreography was unlike anything in American cinema at the time. Adkins threw spinning kicks that defied physics. He moved with a fluidity that made other action stars look like they were moving underwater. The final fight between Adkins and Michael Jai White became instant legendary status among martial arts film enthusiasts. Critics who actually understood fight choreography started saying things like, greatest on-screen martial artist since Jet Li. And if Hollywood had any sense, they'd build franchises around this guy. Black Belt magazine featured him. Martial arts forums exploded with discussion. Here was proof that a Western actor could match, maybe even exceed, the technical mastery of Hong Kong cinema's golden age. The film made money. Not blockbuster money, but solid returns for a direct-to-video release. More importantly, it created a cult following that demanded more. Florentine and Adkins reunited for Undisputed 3, Redemption in 2010. Which is still considered by many fight choreography experts to be one of the greatest martial arts films ever made. Adkins delivered a performance that wasn't just physical. He gave Boyka emotional depth, a redemption arc that actually meant something. The fights were so technically precise that professional fighters used them as training references. He learned Russian for the role, perfecting the accent. He trained until his body broke and then kept training. Surely this was the moment Hollywood would notice. Surely some executive at a major studio would see what everyone else was seeing and give this man a real budget, a real platform, a real shot at mainstream stardom. But here's the thing about Hollywood. It doesn't matter how good you are. It matters whether you fit what they think audiences want to see. And Scott Adkins, a British martial artist making direct-to-video films, didn't fit anyone's formula for a leading man. The breakthrough had happened. The world just wasn't watching. The skills, nobody disputes. Let's talk about what Scott Adkins can actually do, because this is where the injustice becomes impossible to ignore. He holds a black belt in kickboxing, not a Hollywood black belt handed out for publicity. A legitimate belt earned through competition and blood. He's trained in Taekwondo since childhood, reaching levels most practitioners never achieve. His gymnastics and tricking abilities put him in the top 1% of athletes worldwide. He can throw a 720 kick, a spinning aerial kick that requires you to rotate twice in midair while fully extended. Most people can't do that once. Adkins can do it repeatedly, on camera while acting. Stunt coordinators worship him. In an industry where most action stars need doubles for anything beyond a close-up punch, Adkins does everything himself. And not just the easy stuff. He does falls that would hospitalize normal people. He takes real hits for the camera because it looks better than faking it. Directors have said working with him is like having access to a Swiss Army knife that can also do backflips. Compare that to the actors who headline major action franchises. Some are former wrestlers with limited martial arts backgrounds. Others are bodybuilders who learned basic screen fighting. Many are just good-looking people who got handed roles and taught enough choreography to fake their way through scenes. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how movies work. But when you put Scott Adkins next to those actors and watch them move, the difference isn't subtle. It's the difference between a concert pianist and someone who took lessons for 6 months. Jackie Chan once said, "The problem with Western action films is they cut too much. They hide the actor's limitations with camera tricks and editing." You watch a fight in a Hollywood blockbuster, and you see 10 cuts in 5 seconds, because the actor can't actually perform the moves in one continuous take. Then you watch Scott Adkins in Undisputed 3 and the camera holds for 8, 10, 15 seconds at a time, because there's nothing to hide. He's genuinely doing it. Jet Li called him one of the best martial artists he'd ever worked with. Michael Jai White, himself a legitimate martial artist with multiple black belts, said Adkins has abilities that are almost supernatural. These aren't publicists blowing smoke. These are masters of the craft, acknowledging someone who belongs in their company. And here's the kicker. Adkins can act. He's not just a martial artist who memorized lines. He trained at a prestigious drama school. He can deliver emotional performances, handle accents, and carry a film narratively. He's proven this in dozens of roles, playing villains, heroes, conflicted anti-heroes. The range is there. So, why isn't he a household name? Why isn't he the lead in a Marvel franchise or carrying a Fast and Furious movie? Why has he spent 2 decades making films that go straight to streaming platforms, while actors with a fraction of his abilities become international superstars? Because Hollywood has never been about merit. The direct-to-video, Prison After Undisputed 3, Adkins signed with production companies that specialize in direct-to-video action films. Titles like Ninja, Shadow of a Tear, Close Range, Savage Dog, Accident Man, Avengement. If you've heard of any of them, you're already in the tiny percentage of people who follow this corner of cinema. Most of these films had budgets under $5 million. Many were under $2 million. Adkins would shoot them in Bulgaria, South Africa, Thailand, wherever production costs were cheapest. The system works like this. A production company finances a low-budget action film, starring a recognizable name from the action world. They shoot it fast, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. They release it straight to DVD, Blu-ray, and now streaming platforms. The film makes modest returns across international markets, enough to justify making another one. It's a business model, not an artistic movement, and it's a trap. Once you're labeled a direct-to-video actor, Hollywood stops taking you seriously for theatrical releases. Doesn't matter if your films are good. Doesn't matter if you're more talented than the actors getting $100 million budgets. You've been categorized, filed away, and the major studios stop returning calls. Adkins knew this. In interviews, he's talked about the frustration of being locked in this system. He'd read scripts for major studio films and know he could deliver better action than whoever they had cast. But the auditions wouldn't come. The meetings wouldn't happen. He was making 30, 40 films in this direct-to-video world, building a filmography that proved his range and skills, and it didn't matter. The tragedy is that many of his DTV films are genuinely excellent. Ninja, Shadow of a Tear has fight choreography that rivals anything in John Wick. Avengement is a brutal crime thriller with a performance from Adkins that's raw and fearless. Accident Man has humor, heart, and action sequences shot with clarity and style. These films didn't fail because they were bad. They failed to reach mainstream audiences because the distribution system ensures they never get a real chance. Meanwhile, studios were greenlighting projects with actors who couldn't fight, teaching them enough choreography to survive heavy editing, and making billions. The message was clear. Audiences don't actually care about real martial arts skills. They care about marketing, star power, and whether the lead actor fits the narrow mold of what an action hero is supposed to look like. Adkins tried expanding his range. He played villains in films like The Expendables 2 and Doctor Strange, small roles that gave him exposure to massive audiences. He hoped these appearances would open doors. They didn't. He'd show up, deliver a great performance, and then return to the direct-to-video circuit, because that's where someone would actually let him be the lead. For 20 years, this has been his career. Respected within the action community, praised by martial artists and stunt coordinators, beloved by a passionate cult following, and completely invisible to mainstream Hollywood. He became the best-kept secret in action cinema, which sounds romantic until you realize it's another way of saying the industry wasted his prime years making sure nobody outside a small niche audience ever discovered him. The Hollywood double standard. Let's talk about the actors who did get the opportunities Scott Adkins never received. This isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about exposing how the system works and who it favors. Channing Tatum had no martial arts background when he was cast as the lead in G.I. Joe. He's a talented actor and a good dancer, which translates to decent screen fighting with enough training and editing. But put him in a room with Scott Adkins and ask both to demonstrate their skills, and it's not close. Yet, Tatum headlined a massive franchise while Adkins couldn't get a callback. Chris Hemsworth is charismatic and perfect as Thor. No argument there. But his fight training is rudimentary compared to what Adkins brings. Hemsworth learns choreography designed to look good with camera tricks and wire work. Adkins performs techniques that would work in actual combat. One of them is on every billboard in the world. The other is making Accident Man 2 in Bulgaria. Look at John Wick, and Keanu Reeves deserves massive credit for committing to intense training and performing his own action. He worked incredibly hard, and it shows. But imagine if they'd cast Scott Adkins in that role. Someone who didn't need months of gun fu training because he already understood the principles of movement and combat at a level Reeves had to study. The film might have been even better, but Adkins was never considered because he didn't have the name recognition or the traditional leading man look Hollywood wanted. The pattern is consistent. When Marvel cast Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch won the role because he's a brilliant actor who fit the intellectual, mystical vibe they wanted. Fair enough. But when they needed physical roles in the Marvel universe, roles requiring legitimate martial arts skills, they went with actors they'd teach enough choreography to survive heavy editing. Meanwhile, Adkins played a minor villain in Doctor Strange, showed up, did his job flawlessly, and disappeared. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Hollywood operates on a class system. There are A-list actors who get every opportunity, even roles they're not qualified for, because their name recognition justifies the budget. There are character actors who get steady supporting work. And then there are the direct-to-video actors who, no matter how talented, will never be taken seriously for theatrical releases because they've been stamped with that label. Adkins got trapped in that third category not because he lacked talent, but because his first major success, Undisputed 2, was direct-to-video. If that exact same movie had gotten a theatrical release, his entire career trajectory might have changed, but it didn't. So he became categorized as a DTV actor, and Hollywood has never forgiven him for that original sin. The British accent probably didn't help either. American studios still operate under outdated assumptions about who can carry an action franchise. They'll cast a Brit as a villain or supporting character all day long. But as the lead hero, that requires an American accent, apparently. Even though Schwarzenegger and Stallone proved decades ago that audiences don't actually care, So, actors with better agents, better timing, or better luck got the roles that could have been perfect for Adkins. And he kept making direct-to-video films, perfecting his craft, building an incredible body of work that maybe 3% of moviegoers have ever seen. The system doesn't reward the most talented. It rewards whoever fits the formula. And Scott Adkins has never fit anyone's formula. The franchise that almost happened, 2014. Marvel was deep into Phase 2 of the MCU and developing Doctor Strange, a mystical superhero who would bring magic into their universe. Kevin Feige and the Marvel team needed someone who could portray Stephen Strange's physical transformation from surgeon to sorcerer, including intense martial arts training. Scott Adkins auditioned. He went through multiple rounds. By all accounts, he was brilliant. He understood the character, delivered the emotional depth, and obviously could handle any physical requirements. For a moment, it looked like this might finally be his shot. The role that would take him from direct-to-video obscurity to international superstardom. Then Marvel cast Benedict Cumberbatch, and Adkins got offered a minor villain role instead. It wasn't even a named villain with significant screen time. It was Lucian, a henchman for Caecilius, who appears in a few action scenes and then dies. Adkins took the role because what else could he do? Turn down Marvel and wait for another call that might never come. In interviews after the film's release, Adkins was diplomatic. He praised Cumberbatch, said the right things about being happy to be part of the MCU, but you could hear the disappointment. This was the closest he'd ever come to breaking through, and the door had slammed shut again. The frustration grew when rumors started circulating about other franchises. There was talk of Adkins being considered for roles in The Expendables before Stallone went with bigger names. Whispers about action franchises in development that would have been perfect for his skills. But perfect didn't matter. What mattered was name recognition, and Adkins didn't have it because the system had never given him the platform to build it. He almost got cast as Kraven the Hunter in a Spider-Man film before that project fell apart. He was in conversations for a Mortal Kombat reboot that went nowhere. Every time, it seemed like the breakthrough was coming, and every time, it evaporated. The cruel irony is that Adkins had something most actors desperately want: critical respect, peer admiration, and proof of his abilities in dozens of films. But none of that translated to Hollywood opening its doors. The franchises went to actors with bigger agents, better PR teams, or just better luck. And Adkins went back to making films in Bulgaria with budgets smaller than the catering costs on a Marvel movie. He started his own production company, trying to create opportunities himself. He developed projects where he'd have creative control, but even that required financing, distribution, and marketing that kept him in the same direct-to-video ecosystem he'd been trying to escape. The breakthrough almost happened, but almost doesn't change anything. The invisible man syndrome. Here's something most people don't know. Scott Adkins has worked on some of the biggest films ever made. You just never saw his face. He was a stunt double in The Bourne Ultimatum, performing dangerous falls and fight sequences. He did stunt work on Avengers, Age of Ultron, invisible in the chaos of CGI heavy action scenes. He's been in countless major productions, putting his body on the line to make other actors look good. And he never got credit in a way that helped his career. This is how Hollywood treats martial artists who aren't leading men. They use their skills, exploit their abilities, and keep them anonymous. Stunt work pays well enough to survive, but it doesn't build the kind of profile that leads to starring roles. You're a tool, not a talent. Adkins has doubled for actors who can't do a quarter of what he can. He's made them look like credible action heroes while his own face stayed hidden behind masks, CGI, or quick cuts. And when those films made hundreds of millions of dollars, his name appeared deep in the credits, if at all. The frustration must have been overwhelming, watching actors who needed him to make their action scenes work, collect awards, do press tours, and become household names, while he flew back to Bulgaria to shoot another film nobody would see, knowing he could carry any of those franchises better than the people Hollywood chose, but never getting the chance to prove it. In interviews, Adkins has always been gracious about this. He talks about being grateful for the work, appreciative of the opportunities, but there's a sadness underneath, a recognition that the industry doesn't value what he brings to the table in the way he deserves. Other action stars have emerged from stunt work to leading roles, but they usually had something Adkins didn't: the right connections, the right look, or the right project at the right moment. He had the skills, but not the luck. And in Hollywood, luck determines everything. You can be the most talented person in the room, but if the door never opens, nobody will know. And Scott Adkins spent 2 decades being the invisible man, hidden in plain sight, making other people look good while his own potential went unrealized. The streaming revolution. Then something unexpected started happening. Streaming platforms changed the game. Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other services needed content desperately. They didn't care about theatrical releases or traditional distribution models. They cared about having libraries filled with films that satisfied niche audiences. And suddenly, Scott Adkins' decades of direct-to-video films became valuable in a way they'd never been before. His movies started appearing on these platforms where millions of people could discover them by accident. Someone scrolling through Netflix looking for an action film might stumble onto Accident Man or Savage Dog and think, who is this guy? Why have I never heard of him? Social media helped too. Action film enthusiasts started creating compilation videos of Adkins' best fight scenes. YouTube channels dedicated to martial arts cinema highlighted his work. Slowly, the cult following grew. Not massive, not enough to make him a household name, but enough that people started recognizing what had been ignored for so long. In 2018, he starred in Accident Man, based on a British comic book, and the film found a surprising audience on streaming platforms. It was funny, violent, and showcased Adkins' charisma in a way his previous films sometimes hadn't. The success led to a sequel, Accident Man, Hitman's Holiday, released in 2022, which expanded his character and proved he could carry a franchise when given the chance. John Wick's success opened doors too. Suddenly, Hollywood remembered that audiences actually enjoy well-choreographed action shot with clarity instead of hidden behind shaky cameras and rapid editing. Studios started looking for actors who could deliver that kind of action authentically. But by then, Adkins was in his mid-40s, considered too old for the traditional leading man trajectory, even though he was in better shape than actors 20 years younger. He kept working, kept training, kept building his filmography. The streaming era gave him more visibility than he'd ever had, but it still wasn't the breakthrough he deserved. He remained respected by those who knew, ignored by those who didn't. The revolution changed the distribution model, but didn't change Hollywood's fundamental unwillingness to take a chance on someone who didn't fit their narrow definition of a star. The door opened slightly, it just didn't open wide enough. Beilachs so where does that leave Scott Adkins today? At 48 years old, still in incredible shape, still training, still making films. He's older now than Sylvester Stallone was when he made First Blood, older than Arnold was during Predator. But in Hollywood's eyes, he's never been young enough or marketable enough or lucky enough to get that one role that changes everything. His filmography stands at over 50 films. Some are genuinely great, some are mediocre products of low budgets and tight schedules. But even the worst Scott Adkins film contains action sequences that rival anything in mainstream cinema. Watch his work and you're seeing a master of his craft operating at the highest level, regardless of the material around him. The question haunts everyone who knows his work. What if? What if Undisputed 2 had gotten a theatrical release in 2006? What if Marvel had cast him as Doctor Strange? What if some executive at a major studio had taken a chance on building a franchise around him instead of whoever they chose? We'll never know. But we do know this. Scott Adkins is the most skilled martial artist to never become a major star in the history of action cinema. Not might be. Not arguably, objectively, verifiably the most skilled. And Hollywood let him spend his entire prime making films most people will never see. That's not a failure on his part. It's a failure of the system. A system that values marketability over mastery, connections over credentials, and luck over talent. A system that will spend $200 million teaching an actor enough martial arts to fake their way through a role, while someone who dedicated their entire life to perfecting those skills can't get a meeting. But here's the thing about legacy. It's not always about what Hollywood decides. The action community knows, professional fighters know, stunt coordinators know, directors who have worked with him know, and increasingly, audiences who stumble onto his films on streaming platforms know. His reputation is secure among people who actually understand what they're watching. Future generations will discover his work and wonder why he wasn't more famous. Film scholars will write about him as an example of how the studio system fails genuine talent. Martial artists will study his techniques for decades. And maybe, eventually, Hollywood will look back and recognize what they've missed. There's still time for that one role, the right director, the right project, the right moment, when someone with power decides to give him the shot he should have gotten 20 years ago. It's happened before. Liam Neeson became an action star in his 50s with Taken. Maybe Adkins gets his version of that, a film that breaks through, finds a massive audience, and forces everyone to pay attention. Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he keeps making direct-to-video films until his body finally tells him to stop. Maybe the breakthrough never comes, and his legacy remains what it is now. The greatest action star almost nobody's heard of. The martial artist who was too skilled for Hollywood to know what to do with him. Either way, the work speaks for itself. Scott Adkins proved what he could do over and over and over again. The fact that Hollywood refused to listen isn't his problem, it's theirs. And history won't remember him as the guy who failed to become famous. It'll remember him as the guy who deserved so much more than he got. Scott Adkins never needed Hollywood's validation to be great. He just needed them to get out of his way and let audiences discover what people in the action world have known for 2 decades: that he's the real deal. The closest thing to a legitimate martial arts superhero the Western world has produced since Bruce Lee. The tragedy isn't that his career didn't happen. It did. He made over 50 films, created iconic characters like Yuri Boyka, and built a body of work that will outlast most of the blockbusters Hollywood considers successful. The tragedy is that it happened in the shadows when it should have happened in the spotlight. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Scott Adkins' story isn't about fame, it's about the art. About dedicating your life to perfecting something regardless of recognition. About proving yourself over and over again, even when nobody important is watching. Hollywood didn't make him a star. He made himself one anyway. And the people who know. That's a legacy worth having, even if it took the world way too long to notice.